separation of the rib cage and the pelvis in the golf motion is something that is commonly taught and is absolutely perfectly valid as an anatomical necessity to having an elite golf motion. But as most things in golf that are broken down into parts and pieces, it is massively misunderstood and misapplied. You see, the separation is not something that needs to be done, but it must be something that is allowed to happen. And that is what really comes from understanding the true functionality of why that actually happens. Let's get started. Anytime we break down the golf swing and we watch an elite golf motion in slow motion, our eyes really kind of capture and lock onto the parts. The mind naturally wants to make an order of how it works, so we can go, okay, this part works first, this part works second, and this part is third, and so on and so forth. We want to put it together as a tangible system, so if we think about it, we can do it. But that just isn't how we actually do any of our movements naturally on Earth. Everything has much more of a spontaneous and a simultaneous relationship. And when the function is correct, it creates massive illusions. So in regards to this idea of kind of creating separation, there's two kind of misconceptions that I would like to cover. One of them is, and this was commonly taught in the 90s, was this idea that you had to try to create a lot of like restriction between the lower and the upper. Like you wanted to get everything separated by resisting with the lower and letting the upper go to the massive, as if you needed to coil yourself up in this ball of tension to create an explosive energy. Well, that might be what it looks like in some players that have that style of a golf swing, but in the reality, that's a massive misconception. So anytime that you're building tension on the way back, a significant amount, you are likely building something that is going to result in an added force to the golf club. So that's one of the ways that we've seen the separation be misunderstood as kind of a function of the backswing. The other and probably more common misconception is that when you see a really good player, you see their lower body seems to dig out of the way early as the golf club is still going back and kind of folding into the body. That actually is simultaneous to the total movement and is seen though as, okay, when I get here, I got to get my hips out use a force against the ground to get my hips out in front of the golf club. So then that can transfer some energy into the club through my muscles. That also is exactly what we do not want to do. So anytime you see the golf swing in kind of two dimensions and you try to copy it, it's very easy for the mind to try to process it and what to do with the body. And the reality is that what we see as separation is a very instinctive movement. You see, separation is actually what I call unlocking. I don't like to use the term separation because it implies something that you need to do. The reality is it's something you need to allow to happen. So why does the pelvis and the rib cage separate? Well, it separates because movement requires that all the joints become supple so the body can instinctively triangulate itself around its line of gravity to achieve the task. That sounds like it's really complicated, but it's actually not, because anytime you reach over for something or you lean or reach up, there's always an ease to the movement when the body is allowed to be free. If you reach with restriction, you'll feel tension. If you reach with fluidity, not only will you reach faster, but you'll notice that the opposite side of your body tries to create a spin. It does a spin that accommodates the motion. So what we see as separation actually in elite golf motion is actually an allowance of fluidity. It's an allowance of unrestriction to actually happen. So I'm not getting to the top of the motion and then getting ready to like fire my hips. Actually, what we see is an unlocking, and that unlocking of the joints allows the golf club and the body to open up farther, allows the golf club to get in a better spot where you have more time and more available time and a greater distance to travel to get to the golf ball. And that actually allows more speed to come in there. So it's truly an unlock. So here would be a locked swing. Here's an unlocked swing. Here's a locked swing. Here's an unlocked swing. So if you understand you're getting ready to unlock, when I'm unlocked now, guess what? My pelvis can move what feels like independently of my upper body. And it isn't that they're moving independently, it just requires that if I hold tension in my pelvis and I'm locked up, I'll move everything together and that will cause me to spin out and throw the golf club outwards. And then I start pulling down on the golf club to make a compensation for that. So the separation is a quote-unquote relaxation. It is a allowance, it is a freedom in the joints to just kind of fall and then that allows everything now to expand very, very easily. Now there's a clear path for the lower part of the body to balance the extending and the flowing reach of the golf club to strike for you. So that's all that separation really is. So if you could think of it as an unlock, that would be a much better way to think of it, as opposed to something that you need to do. It's something that you actually allow to happen, and it's quite easy. And in the next segment of this video, I'm going to show you some exercises where you can start to develop that. So my favorite way to teach or coach players to get the experience or the exploration of being unlocked, which isn't something that there's no dogma to this, or no exact way or things that you need to do, because as I said, being unlocked is something that happens very naturally. It's like a major league pitcher always unlocks as they throw. So if they're unlocked, then they can create a lot more velocity, whereas if they tighten up, they're not going to throw the ball near as far or as fast. So unlocking happens in all explosive motions and explosive reaching motions. So coming back to what's the best way to develop that? Well, my favorite one is simply just to hold the golf club like a hockey stick and just work, first of all, on the idea of just how would I just naturally move this? Forget about golf for a second. If I just wanted to reach out and touch something, what would that be like? So if I try to force it out, I'll feel a lot of resistance in my body, but the easiest way to reach and touch requires that the body be completely fluid. So if I know that unlocking is for the functionality of reaching in an explosive fast way, then I have a much better understanding of kind of why I would need to do that in my golf motion. So in my golf motion now, if I go like hockey stick here, and if I really open up, if I really want to find the easiest way back down there, if I go back and I lift, it's awkward. But if I unlock, this folds into my body easily, and then I can just easily reach it. So the anatomy naturally starts to move in a separated way without physically trying to create a separation. It happens very, very instinctively. So it's very much based on the idea of allowing this to reach. The reason I like to use a hockey motion is because when you go with the full golf swing, the first thing you start to feel is the center of mass and the weight, and it starts to put you back into lifting motions, and then you feel like you got to force these things to happen. So it's very important that over time, as we go from our hockey movement to our golf motion, we learn, hey, the unlocking also is matched with a softness in the wrists and the shoulders and the elbows. Everything must be free to move. And then that's what then creates what we would call the separation element of a golf swing. So if you want to get good at separating, try not to think of it as separation. Understand the functionality of separation and then pursue it through something very natural like opening up and just reaching. It's obvious in this way, in this context, that I need my body to be more fluid to allow it to reach. It's not so obvious when I can feel the center of mass and I have an intention to swing the golf club, then it would become much more cumbersome.